Hey there, folks, and welcome back into the Northern Futbol Podcast, episode 229. We're flying by in terms of putting up these episodes. Sooner or later, it'll be 300, and I think that will line up just about for the start of the World Cup as well. Certainly an exciting time for Canadian soccer, but a bit of a down week in terms of the storylines that we'll get into this week. Ben Steiner alongside Alex Jonge-Ruzic and Brendan Dunlop once again. And Brendan, I know you were all over it this weekend. We're going to play soccer tonight, but Toronto FC and Toronto Soccer, the feature game is tonight with the Queen's Park Strangers starting their season and maybe the most winning team in Toronto right now.
Yeah, Ben Steiner pulling on the gloves. We did lose on penalties in the final, though, 2 weeks ago. So brand new season, outdoor, out of the bubble. Basically the bar is be better than Toronto FC, and I'm pretty confident that results-wise, QPS can do that.
That's it. We got Brendan. Can he score more goals than Ola Brynhildsen? Can Ben save more or have more clean sheets than Sean Johnson? Granted, the TFC do have a few clean sheets. Those are going to be the questions, but that will be a fun storyline. Up the QPS. Can't tell if that sounds like a delivery company, sounds like some sort of political party, or it sounds like some sort of like sometimes when there's like I don't know, like a muscle, and there's like some sort of like random recovery, like he's got the QPS. I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that.
QPS.
Oh, what'd you do to your foot? I just stepped funny. Oh, did you break your QPS? Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, it sounds like that.
And what's the origins of Queen's Park Strangers? For those who don't know, that's Brendan's longtime rec league team here in Toronto that I've subbed in on and I'm now officially on as a goalkeeper.
The sickos are going to go real deep dive into the stats here on the Queen's Park Strangers. I'll sum it up very quickly. My brother was the goalkeeper for us originally when I started the team. He's a big Queen's Park Rangers fan. And the whole point of kind of starting the team was to get one season in before he moved away to Hong Kong. So there was a handful of us that had played together for like a little while. But to fill out the team, I had to go deep into the Rolodex of just the social circle. So I was the only person that knew everybody on the team. And that continued for probably 4 or 5 iterations of this squad, which has been running since 2017. So because I was the only person that actually knew everybody, they were strangers when they first met. Queen's Park Strangers was with a hat tip to my QPR loving brother.
And Alex, how's the muscle recovery going after a big weekend for you with your first race? Then we'll get into the soccer talk.
Yeah, no, I feel great. It was a fun little experience on Sunday. It was just a good weekend out in Vancouver. We had our first Sunset Beach FC run of the year, and that was always a lot of fun. As you guys know, it was beautiful yesterday. First sunset, great weather. Couldn't have asked for more for the first run. So yeah, definitely between the race and that, it just feels like summer's here, man. It feels like summer's here, and all of a sudden, we're gonna see me smiling more on the podcast. I'm gonna get a little more tan, and who knows? Maybe we'll have some great things to say.
Well, I certainly got my fair share of sun in Florida last week, and that sunburn has been recovering nicely for anybody that wanted an update on that from last week's talk. But we'll jump into the Canadian soccer talk now. Toronto FC, that was the story of the weekend. The fans protesting, revolting in some ways, a bit of a throwback to Block 114, the Inter Biati as well, that may or may not be there anymore. A little bit unclear. I know Waking the Red dove into it, but TFC, another listless performance, a 2-0 loss to the New England Revolution. Fans asked to take down their banners. Many of them ushered out as well from the videos that we've seen circulating online. But just everything's not going well for TFC right now. And on a Leafs game day in the second round, MLSE CEO Keith Pelly had to pen a letter to TFC season ticket holders, Brendan.
Yeah, man, that really sums it up, doesn't it? And that letter to season ticket holders did not go over well based on the comment section on Waking the Red and on Twitter and Blue Sky from what I've seen as well. Man, it's frustrating, for those fans. And I think for Robin Fraser and the team, who seemed like maybe they were turning the corner, they took points off Vancouver. They took points off Miami. They took points off Minnesota. Those are the 3 best teams in the standings in Major League Soccer, or at least were at the time in which they played them. But that performance against New England was probably the worst of the season. And I think that the fan base has felt, despite those results, that there isn't any consistency and there isn't a plan for this team. It's just hope to be better than last week. And they haven't done that. So when Robin Fraser comes out time and time again and his comments are, I loved how engaged everyone was. And, when we're engaged, we can be at our best. And after that loss to New England, he said, we've shown that we can go toe-to-toe with anyone in this league. No, you haven't. You haven't shown that. Yes, you have drawn those 3 teams, as I mentioned, but you can't make that comment after that performance against New England. And the fans and their anti-management signs, that was so soft on, in comparison to what we see around the world, but even what we've seen from that group in the past before. I mean, they weren't lighting seats on fire, they weren't vulgar in the signs. It was two messages that are no different than that fan group had been singing over the last weeks, and certainly on social media. So I think it was an overreaction, a misstep from the club, when in general they haven't been able to make the right step on the pitch to appease that fan base and to appease the people that have paid a lot of money to be supporters and have watched some really bad soccer in that stadium for a long time. And Alex, that's the frustrating thing, man. Is like, you know what it's like at BC Place. They can fill that lower bowl when the Whitecaps are playing well, and for the most part, for the last 7 years since you guys moved to Toronto for university, they have played well, and that is a team worth showing up for to support. Whereas for Toronto, for a long time, for TFC fans, it's more of like a cultural experience. Like, you keep your tickets so that you've got something to do every Saturday. You keep your tickets so you can see your friends in the stands. You keep your tickets so you hope you can see some good soccer, and that's not a good business plan, man.
Well, and it doesn't help that it feels like with every passing year, there's new options popping up, not just for sports lovers, but footy
Yeah.
lovers. All of a sudden, even though it's a trek, all of a sudden the subway up to York to go see either United or AFC Toronto, all of a sudden becomes a lot more appealing. I've been seeing a lot of comments from Toronto soccer fans feeling that way. Certainly going down the other way. To the west over to Hamilton is also another appealing option to go see Forge. But no, for me with TFC, what just surprised me was just the Canadian Championship game. I finished watching it yesterday because, of course, it was something where we were in Fort Lauderdale when it happened, and I wasn't able to watch it live. But I watched back, and it shocked me at the time. But like the fact they didn't put out their best lineup, like that Federico Bernardeschi didn't see the field, that they rotated their back line, goalkeeper, midfield. And for me, that's just a bit shocking, because at the end of the day, this was a huge moment for the club, because yes, it's just a Canadian Championship game, but at the end of the day, trophies mean something. Trophies are momentum. There's no coincidence that for all the 3 Canadian MLS teams, some of their best runs have started with something as small as a Canadian Championship. For the Whitecaps, this doesn't all happen if they don't get that first feeling of a trophy in 22, and then they build on it in 23, and then in 24. And now there's just kind of this itch where they want to be winners. They want to win more than just a Canadian Championship, and that's led to this season. When TFC was winning Canadian Championships and MLS Cups, it was all together. It was just for them, as we win, we want to go get trophies. Did it with Montreal when they made that deep run, and whenever they've been good in MLS, it's kind of coincided. And I just thought it was very shocking for a team that's been as bad as TFC for the last few years, that they saw this Canadian Championship game against a Montreal team that is in a similar situation. They're like, nah, let's rotate. Like, that's just, for me, is insane. And yes, you know what? It was a gamble, and it almost paid off. If TFC marks a little tighter on Bironi on the last minutes, they probably beat Montreal. Montreal didn't play that great, but Montreal at the end of the day rolled up their sleeves and locked in and did what they needed to in the end. That's cup football. And now I'm just, for TFC, what's left to play for? That was pretty much the one chance they had of a trophy. And now it's just these meaningless MLS games. I'm not surprised to see a fall off a few days later. Now if I'm from that perspective, I'm scared to see where it goes, because if you're the players, there's not much to be playing for at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking to me that Toronto FC didn't make a bigger effort in that Canadian Championship game. You start to think, whether there's a commitment, maybe a contractual commitment for Bernardeschi, for example, to play MLS games rather than Canadian Championship games. Maybe that was the goal when Insigne and Bernardeschi came into the club, was to prioritize MLS, get back to an MLS Cup rather than the Canadian Championship, which is going to be a lot less lucrative. I've been to, countless games where they're playing, Simcoe County last year in front of 5,000 at BMO Field, York United a couple of years prior to that they're not getting much money off these Canadian Championship games, even if they make a deep run in these tournaments. But when you look at the season to this point, how do you not sit down with a guy like Bernardeschi and say, you know what, even if this is in your contract, like, look at where we are in the standings. We're better than Montreal, and I think they are better than Montreal. Go and win this. try and beat a couple CPL teams. They should be able to beat CPL teams, given, that would still be an upset, as much as Forge has shown their qualities against TFC over the years, including beating them last year. But you have to prioritize a tournament like that, and they didn't do that. Montreal, I don't think they go on and win this thing. I think they get upset by a CPL team at some point. I think the Whitecaps can beat them with a second team. This was Toronto FC's season, Toronto FC's tournament, and I don't blame the fans for the frustrations that they had on the weekend. And I think it could get a lot worse as well, especially when you consider what this supporters group, Block 114, has done in the past. Brennan.
Honestly, man, it felt like they conceded as soon as the draw was picked. That they didn't really believe that they had a chance, and they were trying to micromanage maybe for the few weeks before. Christian Jack made the point on One Soccer, about the bonuses perhaps in Bernadeschi's contract, and we don't know the specifics of it, but there has been mention of these kind of odd triggering bonuses before, and he had an extension based off of some assist total or something. That automatically triggered his contract extension. So it would really suck if they were drafted that way, to not prioritize the Canadian Championship, or to have some weird inclusion that's like, oh, look, first round, you don't got to play. And then the player doesn't recognize in the moment, like, okay, like if I'm fit and ready to go, I can find rest elsewhere. Like, this is important. Like, it did feel like collectively the team didn't look at that date and think this is our most important game of the season. And really, they might, to your point, they might not have a game as important as that for the rest of the year, which is really damn sad.
Well, so not to butt in on this, Brendan, but just to like, the thing is, last year Bernadeschi played against Saint Laurent. He played against Forge. That's the thing too, where it's like, it's not as if this has been something he's just never played in the Canadian Championship since he's come. It makes it more puzzling when they had that focus last year. With John Herdman, they clearly prioritized that competition. We're putting out lineups to destroy League One teams that they could have comfortably beat. So it does make it puzzling this year when they have a legit hard early round game that could alter their season, that all of a sudden that same approach was just thrown out the window.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's exactly why the fans have, in my opinion, all the right to be as angry as they are. What's wild is that, Coelho said it in his post-match, that like, it feels like they're at a real fork in the road here, where that result against New England can either send them down last year's road, or they can realize, well, look, they're not that far off. Just like pull up the bootstraps and like really dig in. And it kind of felt like, they hit that turning point in the Terry Dunfield year as well, where there was a bit of a manager boost there for a minute, and a good feeling for, what was it, 2 weeks after Bob Bradley, and then they just rode out the rest of the season, and you just hope that they didn't lose 6-0 every night. To go down that road again is not a good place to be.
It's May 6th, and we're having this conversation about TFC not having any more meaningful games. It's a little bit crazy, but a question from Kennedy on Blue Sky: if you could force TFC's leadership to learn one lesson from this debacle of a season, what would it be, Brendan?
From this season so far, I think it would be, like, recognize that the Canadian Championship has more meaning than just the financial reward that comes from it, or the trophy at the end of it. I think that there's momentum to the season. I think that there's Robin Fraser still trying to really find like a footing, and I think find his best team. Like, those are all important. And for them to, have the experience that they have had over the last few years and not recognize that or write that off, it looks bad in the whole organization. I don't think that that's all Robin Fraser's fault, but it really does feel like, Robin Fraser was the hopeful selection when they hired him. He's a really well-liked guy in that club for what he did before, and from all accounts across MLS, he's perceived as this very nice, well-liked individual as well. But that seems to not be what this team needed right now, and it might not be enough to turn things around in this season. And I just feel like it feels very dire heading into the World Cup, especially right next summer, with Toronto being this eyesore for Canadian MLS, but for Canadian soccer right now, it's not a good spot.
Well, this is, I think, with Robin Fraser, I struggle to look at him and point the blame because it's there's been Robin Fraser, it's been John Herdman, it's been Terry Dunfield as an interim, it's been Bob Bradley, it's been Chris Armas, it's been, I remember Javier Perez when he was there. Like, at a certain point when you're hitting 5, 6, 7, 8 managers, and there's been a core of players that have been around through most of them. you just kind of look at, you know, the culture, the team, right? I think that's something where it's something we've said a lot. It's just this roster is currently constructed. Like, would you trust and you know these coaches to come in and fix it? Like, would a Jim Curtin come in and make a difference? Would you, if you took a coach who's already like, would Wilfred Nancy come in, like, you know, get something out of this team? That's where something. I think the culture is also a big thing, because when it's that many managers, when there's always these like little upticks and then drops, right? Like, you can't help but look at the players of, is there a core group that can, you know, lead this team throughout the grueling nature of a season, ride the highs, and, you know, not get sunk down by the lows. And I think the fact that it's been so many different managers, so many different seasons, so many potential moments of optimism, and that they're still here. They don't really have a trophy to show for it. They don't have success to show for it. You can't help but look at the group of players. And I think that's something the leadership will have to look at in terms of what's the best way forward. Maybe it's not being so focused on addition all the time, because that's kind of been a priority, bringing in some, you know, like some good signings. Like, you could think Brynhildsen and you know, was it Dominguez, the midfielder, is it, if I'm not mistaken, that brought in like all decent additions. They've made some decent additions last year. At the end of the day, maybe the best additions will be by subtract, you know, figure out, of course that starts with the Italians, but that goes without saying, but maybe there's other areas of the roster they have to look at of, okay, maybe you just got to clear it out. Throw in a couple of hometown kids will be hungry and at least go out, work hard, and start from there, right? And I think that's something that I would just use to say for the parallel, the Whitecaps, because it's a more familiar story to us. You know, the Whitecaps, this whole run doesn't start without, you know, completely clearing out that disaster of a 2018, 2019, 2020 group, right? They just completely reset, slowly got guys out, and then they started to build. You start to build. And I think with TFC, they've kept trying to build. And, you know, you can't build if the foundation is sus, right? Rotting wood, it won't last very long. And I think with TFC, I think that these last few years have kind of reinforced that there's some rotting wood at the foundation.
Too many David Milinkovic's with Toronto FC if you want to go down that route with the 2018 Whitecaps. But CF Montreal continued to struggle as well. Of course, they won midweek in the Canadian Championship, thanks to that terrible Toronto FC team. But 2-1 loss to Philadelphia in MLS. Not really getting that confidence boost from the Canadian Championship. Quick thoughts on the CF Montreal team that just can't seem to get anything going for them, Alex?
Yeah, I think for Montreal, I think they know the Canadian Championship's kind of their tournament. I think it was very interesting that, you know, they rotated heavily the week before the Canadian Championship, but good on them. They recognize, like, this is a disastrous start. What are they up to? 3 points, no wins. They're entering some very historic territory in terms of teams that have started that way. If it weren't for the LA Galaxy just completely forgetting how to play football and losing games where their opponents don't even shoot the football, maybe it's a different story and we're talking about CF Montreal more, but they recognize the Canadian Championship is a big tournament for them. This is something to win. And I think that at this point for MLS, and you can kind of see it, like, again, with Montreal, they want to build a bit of a foundation. What I do find interesting is watching that CanChamp game. I love the fight they showed. Joel Waterman in particular really stepped up as a leader in that second half and took the team on his back. Sam Piet came off. He put on the armband and just really rallied the troops. That's interesting to see it for Montreal, because, yeah, in their perspective, they just need any sort of momentum, any sort of good vibes. And I think the Canadian Championship can provide that. The reality is in MLS right now, for whatever reason, they're just not talented enough to be winning these games, although they are showing a little more cohesion, and maybe that can be a bit of a start.
The contrast between Montreal and Toronto over the last few years is so interesting, because obviously the resource disparity involved, but also the hits that Montreal have had with young players, Nathan Saliba, Vilsaint, who we haven't seen enough of. You know, maybe Broguillard didn't hit the heights that we've expected, but Kone certainly. They develop players that make a big impact and either help the club hit above their weight, as they have over the last couple of years, maybe not last season, or be at a sell-off point where you know, they make the business operation look good and arguably look better than it has been. For CF Montreal to go into the winter and decide to keep Laurent Courtois, only to get rid of him 5 games into the season, like, that is such a big misstep that I don't think that they're going to recover from this year. And last year, we heard about the infighting in the locker room. Joseph Martinez and Courtois looked like they were going to go to blows. Then they had that great finish to the season. They were really unlucky not to win that playoff tie against Brad Guzan and Atlanta and get a chance to go up against Messi. And who knows, maybe Montreal would have upset Miami last year in the first round. Like the parallels or the what could have been roads for Montreal. There's so many options, and I just feel like sadly they keep stepping down the wrong one. I really wish they could have had another situation with the season to start the season, not 7 games on the road again. In years past, that's been really difficult for them. They didn't have the foundation. They didn't have the team to do that this year. And I think that's really, largely what's really burned their season. But unlike TFC, I think that from within, Montreal will find a way to pull some roses out of this season, be that in the Canadian Championship or, with some players that carry them to some wins later on in the year as they hit more highs. Like last year with Caden Clark and, I know some of those guys were mid-season additions, but I do trust that Montreal will find a way to get some results. It's just unfortunate to see them shoot themselves in the foot, and I think that getting rid of Courtois was a big one.
And Montreal getting Brioni back into the lineup. He's shown okay to start off his Montreal career, so we'll see where that goes. Of course, not exactly a highly touted designated player, but certainly one they added on the cheap, and who knows, maybe that can help loft Montreal to some better results over the next little while. But it's not all doom and gloom for Canadian teams in Major League Soccer. Of course, the Vancouver Whitecaps, another win. They're making it look easy right now in MLS, 7 points clear of the top of the Western Conference, 2 points in front of Columbus atop MLS Supporters Shield standings. 2-1 win over Real Salt Lake. They missed a penalty. They allowed a penalty. Alex, I know you were in the building for that one, and just another masterclass from these Jesper Sorensen Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah, we really did the TFC and Montreal fans dirty by just going in like, man, TFC is falling apart. Montreal, their attack needs some work. But then, the Whitecaps, they keep on winning, top of the Supporters Shield, top of the West by 7 points already, and it's beginning of May. First off, side note, I don't know what the heck has happened to the West. It's really not looking great. And I think it's going to be a 3-horse race between the Whitecaps, LAFC, and Seattle, which LSA and Seattle, they just always find a way. But, man, some of these teams are really disappointed me. Anyways, regardless, for the Whitecaps, what I just love about this game was just how inevitable it was. Showing up at the building, you felt like they were going to go out and win. And then they played for about 10 minutes, think, oh, yeah, they're going to go win. And it's just scary because you have to sit back and look at the factors. No Brian White or Ryan Gault. Last year, that would have been a guaranteed 2-0 loss against a team like RSL. As soon as you saw that, you put in a bunch of guys like Ralph Priso goes out and puts up a top performance. A guy last year was maybe struggling to find his place within this Whitecaps team. They just keep finding a way. And what I loved is it's a long week. They had travel. They had injuries. They didn't even play at their 100%. This was maybe a 60-70% game, yet they dominated possession. They won the XG battle handily. They doubled the shots. They didn't give up much of quality. And had that not been there, that late penalty from RSL, it would have been a comfortable 2-goal result. That's for me an elite team, because these Whitecaps, they've shown that when they play well, man, they play well and they can blow the doors off an opponent. But for me, I always say the elite teams, they win the games where guys aren't feeling 100%, where you're rotating. And I think the Whitecaps have shown they have that in them, and that's the scariest part, because that usually makes a difference. Because sometimes you play a big game and you're not at your best. Heck, the first leg against Miami was an exact example of that. Yet they won that game, and that set them up. And I think they're doing it. It's great to see them in MLS play have some of those games where they don't play their best and still win.
What's scary for everybody else, Ben, is that I think the Vancouver Whitecaps can still be even better. And I asked Jesper Sorensen that directly. You've had this phenomenal start. Can you actually be better? And immediately he's like, yeah, of course. He's like, there's a lot of elements where we've performed really well. Maybe we even surprised. He is genuinely surprised by how the team has responded without Ryan Gauld there, who's been their talisman. And everyone who's either stepped in that direct position or had to step up because, Gauld is no longer there in the middle of the park working his magic. Everyone has stepped up and elevated their game. And you look at the way Vite's playing, the way Ahmed's playing. Obviously, Sebastian Berhalter, it's devastating that he's not going to be in the Champions Cup final. But he's legitimately in an MVP conversation. That's an automatic all-star this year, Sebastian Berhalter, someone that we'll all be frustrated about, and I'm sure we'll have a long podcast if he doesn't get picked by Mauricio Pochettino for the Gold Cup team. Like, it's incredible to watch these guys. Tristan Blackman's another one, continue to step up and for them to get the results. I really love that. They had that response against Minnesota in between the legs, where it seemed like they didn't have their attention focused on a major club defining moment, and then coming off of that, there was no letdown. Like, this team's still getting better.
But one of the more fun stories in Canadian soccer this week as well, Canadian futsal. Who knew that Canadian futsal could be so good? I mean, they just started the Canadian women's futsal program. The first time Canada's had a national women's futsal team. They had open trials. A bunch of university players were at those trials, and they go to the CONCACAF championships and they win. They come back after losing going down 3-0 to Mexico in the semifinal. They come back within about 15 minutes and end up winning that game, and they beat Panama 8-2 in the final. This kind of came out of nowhere, but Canada's going to another World Cup. It's the Futsal World Cup later this year in the Philippines. Brendan, I know there was a story on Canadian Soccer Daily about it. What a story that this Canadian women's futsal team is qualified for World Cup.
Yeah, I'm not going to act like I know a lot about the program. I mean, this tournament came up, and all of a sudden, like most of us, I started paying attention to it. But absolutely great response. Like, obviously, there's talent there, and futsal I find is like it seems very regional in this country. Alex, you would know, like in Quebec, futsal is massive and makes sense given the weather. But it's not something I think that has been in the major soccer landscape in this country. And at the moment where we want as much attention, investment, and interest in women's soccer as we can possibly have, it's great that we've got it in another format. So, full kudos to the team for qualifying for the futsal Women's World Cup, because we'll all be watching now.
It's definitely weather related. Like, in BC where we play outside year round, the futsal is maybe a bit behind at Quebec or Ontario where you're kind of forced inside and etc. But no, something that stood out too, just from this whole run, is that it's like context. Like, this was the first ever CONCACAF Women's Futsal Championships. This is going to be the first ever Women's Futsal World Cup. These are two new events, long overdue. That it's crazy. It's 2025, and these are two events that are getting launched. But it's great to see Canada right away, like in the year one of this, go out and put in the performances they put in the championships, and of course we'll follow them along at the World Cup, because I think futsal for me feels like such an area of like potential in this country, just because of the weather. First and foremost, like the weather is a huge one. If in a world where there's already a lack of infrastructure, as we've talked about many a time, lack of bubbles, lack etc., this is a great way to play. And the reality is you learn so much from futsal. There's a reality why all these Brazilians that pop up have grown up with futsal. Guys like Ronaldinho talks about, I just grew up playing futsal all the time, and so I learned basically to have the ball glued to my foot when I played. It would be nice to see Canadians develop those futsal skills, and the fact that we've been given, due to our country's weather conditions, a climate where we're kind of forced to play maybe more futsal. I would love to see more and more clubs encourage it. Even if you're in a club in the winter season in Ontario, they should make futsal leagues a thing. And Canada could really be decent at futsal. So it's great to see it on the women's side. There's some real ballers in this team that we might see in 11-a-side pitches going forward, because there's a lot of potential for the sport in this country.
There was 3 players from Saskatchewan on this team as well. And you don't see that in the 11-a-side game, really, but Saskatchewan, cold climate, you're playing in gyms and church basements there, as you do across the country in Canada outside of BC pretty much. And they were a prominent feature on this team. A few notable names did stand out to me, just having followed, the 11-a-side game. Kira Mellenhorst playing in the NCAA right now, 21-year-old standout. I believe she's at Pittsburgh right now. Former Montreal Carabin midfielder Maud Lagasse was on this team as well. I watched her a ton in U Sports. And former University of Ottawa star, now playing at University of Florida, Sadie Sider-Eckenberg, who played briefly in Liga over in France as well. But Alex, were there any names that stood out to you on this Canadian women's futsal team?
Well, you have it here in the notes. Esther Brossard, she scored a hat trick in the final, won the tournament's best player award. She was one where I kind of not many names popped up on the original roster, but she did. because I saw her play at the League One Canada Interprovincial Championships in Langley in 2023. She was leading the line for CF Montreal's academy. She was only like 15 or 16 at the time. And the game I watched was her and her Montreal side against would have been, it would have been against the Whitecaps or Unity. I forget who it was. And she scored a hat trick, and she was just like an unreal player, just so technical, incredible finishing, heck of a player. So I was like, okay, wow, this is someone to keep an eye on. She had something like 20 plus goals in Liga in Quebec that year as a 16-year-old. So I'm not surprised to see her do well. And that's why I feel like someone that if she continues to play in the 11-a-side game, we'll see her in an NSL team. Like if you're Montreal Roses, surely you're looking at what she can do in terms of goal scoring. They're already stacked up front. They don't need her now, but with her potential at 18, you saw it in this futsal tournament. She's an incredible player, and I thought that was a really cool one to see.
And our Canucks Abroad section as well. Of course, you can follow Canucks Abroad on whatever social platform. I know they're on Instagram and collaborating with us on a number of posts there as well. But Alphonso Davies is still injured, but he did win his 6th Bundesliga title on Saturday as Bayern Munich drew 3-3 with RB Leipzig. And Harry Kane finally got his first trophy as well. Brendan, when you look at Alphonso Davies just continuing to rack up the trophies, it does count towards his tally. Unfortunately, he was still sidelined for this one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they didn't get to celebrate, with the beer. Although they wouldn't want to do that on the road anyway. They'll get to do it this time. But Harry Kane had his Jamie Vardy or his Liverpool moment where he got to celebrate in the privacy of cell phone cams and with the partying amongst his teammates, not actually at the pitch. But yeah, good for Harry Kane to finally get that one under his belt. That's obviously felt very heavy on his shoulders and felt like a curse for a long time. And for Alphonso Davies, man, 6 Bundesliga titles since being there, and he's played such a significant role. That's pretty incredible. I think if you told him that he would come away with 6 Bundesliga titles, even as powerful as that they are, but that he would be such an important part of that team, he probably would say, "Oh, how long did I play for? Till I'm 40? Did I stay there that entire time?" So that it's pretty incredible that he's been able to be such a big part of that team and have as much success as they have. And they're going to look weird next year. I don't know if you've seen the kit leak for that, the shirt for next season. It looks a bit strange, but they're going to be a damn good team, man. With or without Leroy Sané, they're going to be a damn good team.
So at 24, he is turning 25 this year, and he has 6 Bundesliga, the Champions League, I think 14 total trophies. It just shows the standard of a club. People, we always talked about Bayern or Real. Should he have stayed? Should he have gone? It just shows that staying. It's a massive club, and I'm sure they'll. This will be a disappointment to them. You can't help but wonder what they could have done against Inter, who they were so close to getting past. Had they had their full complement of players, you just know they're going to have a busy off season. Although I will say on Bayern, it's not going to feel right to watch Bayern without Thomas Muller. Like, that guy is Bayern. He is so Bayern, and the fact that he won't be there next year is really going to feel like a proper transition year. Because from all now that between Lahm, Schweinsteiger, Muller, all these guys that were so proper Bayern, Neuer in the 2010s, the fact that Neuer is the only one left, and even then he might, who knows what his future is going to be looking like with his injuries. It's quite the turnaround.
Well, I think Thomas Muller will be FC Cincinnati, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Maybe he can become the face of that club at some point. But Brendan's got to hop off. Alex and I will continue to go through this last bit of the show. But Brendan, we'll see you tonight for 11 p.m. kickoff for the Queen's Park Strangers.
Enjoy it, boys. I can't wait to see you pull the gloves on for my co-ed league team, Ben.
Get a good nap in, like a pro. A lot of water, too.
Nap and a spro.
Oh, how Italian.
It was a bit of a rare quiet week for Promise David as well. USG beat Club Brugge and then drew them before beating Genk to take a 1-point lead in the Belgian league title race. David didn't score against Bruges, the only top Belgian club he hasn't scored against, and then missed a PK versus Genk. He'll hope to find his form in the last 3 games to secure USG's first title in a long time, 90 plus years. And once again, we'll get into this system because it's the most confusing league system in Europe, but USG might be coming out on top.
Yeah, well, again, also just random side note, I saw there's news that they might be getting rid of this format in 2 years. If that's the case, Jupiler Pro League, if you're listening, don't listen to these people like Ben who don't believe in the beauty of a championship round. I think it's the best format in Europe. I just love it. I love that Union Saint-Gilloise, all these teams, they've got put into basically like a Royal Rumble, and the best team wins the title. That's the way it should be, man. Forget all this nonsense in MLS for the regular season. All these things don't matter. This is the way to have the regular season matter, but also have an insane playoffs. And I just love the story, like the way that USG, someone who hasn't won a title in 90 plus years, I think it is just wild. And that they've gone out, and if they do win this title, they can look back like, yeah, we beat Bruges and drew them. We beat Genk twice when they had a 10-point lead over them. I just love that story. And for David, he'll hope to do well. For what it's worth, these are all the heavyweight games out of the way. They got another one against Ghent, who has basically just been a free 3 points for everyone. I think they also got Antwerp. So those will be some big games for David, and he'll look to bounce back because he's never been really. This is the only like quiet portion he's had because he's scored every 2 games at most. So he'll definitely have some goals up his sleeve to help his team make some history.
And Jonathan David picked up an assist in Lille's 1-1 draw with Marseille to keep them in the running for the Champions League. And Dane Sinclair also is up to 6 clean sheets in MLS, tied for the league lead, as Minnesota beat Austin 3-0. That Austin FC team looks terrible, despite having almost $30 million invested in their attackers. Jason Russell-Rowe also scored his 4th goal of the season for the Columbus Crew in a win over Charlotte FC, which was one of the better matches I watched this weekend. Unlike that LA Galaxy game where Sporting Kansas City won with no shots on target. But some questions from Andy at AndyGold61. Noah Kenshin Brown, Japanese youth international born in Montreal. Is he worth a look, or is the Japanese league not a level near worth discussing?
Yeah, this is a fun question because, Noah Kenshin Brown, 23-year-old forward, Montreal born, playing in the J League. All I would say, I just threw this question in because I think it's something obviously a while away, but he's just got to score, got to get some form. I don't think he's gotten a goal this year, if I'm not mistaken. I can be corrected on that. But the Japanese league, I've always said, is slept on. I do wonder if he potentially uses, like, there's been a bit of a J League to MLS pipeline. He could make a very shrewd attacking signing for perhaps an MLS team, and then we could really see how close or how far he is. But yeah, he's a forward. We know how crowded the forward line is. I think it might be a while before we hear him even in discussions. But like any forward, I will say, just go out and score. We didn't know who Promised David was a year ago, and he just went out and scored and then kept on scoring and then moved to a club that people knew. And then he kept on scoring there, and then people are, all right, this guy is all right. Sometimes that's all I need for a striker. So no, it was fun to see that shout for a Canadian. As a former J League sicko from during COVID, I wouldn't mind seeing a J Leaguer on the CanMNT. At one point, we had Daniel Henry in the K League on the CanMNT. It could be fun to see a J Leaguer.
Well, to stay on the J League point as well, from Evan Bagmilk FC, who I know contributes to Canucks Abroad and their tracking of Canadians all around the world. I saw him tweet this weekend that Canadian-eligible goalkeeper Alexander Pisano made his J1 League debut with Nagoya Grampus on Saturday, picking up a clean sheet in the process. Do you know anything about the 19-year-old Canadian making his first start in the J League?
I do not, but again, another J Leaguer in the in the system, so to speak. Again, 19. You do wonder if maybe that could be someone who's eligible for a U20, or if there's any U23 camps that come up. That's the thing where we talk a lot about youth camps. These are the kind of guys you'd like to ideally see, right? The guys who might be a ways from the first team, but there's still some potential. There's some intrigue. They play in circuits maybe that aren't as known or as followed, or at least from a Canadian perspective, like the J League. So no, it's cool to see a couple of Canadians pop up who are really, like, you say over the pond. It feels like they're over the pond and then some. Would be cool to see them potentially suit up in like a youth camp or something like that.
And over on the women's side as well, Ashley Lawrence and Kadisha Buchanan won another WSL title. Lawrence is second and Buchanan's third, as Chelsea have won 6 WSLs in a row. If they could only turn that into winning a UWCL as well.
Yeah, that's the one that just continues to elude them. And then this year again, Barcelona, just too good. It's Sonia Bonpastor's, that's why she was brought in. She'd won one with Lyon as a coach, and of course a few as a player. But for Chelsea, that just seems to be the one hurdle they can't get over. Barcelona's just dominating, taking over. It just feels like it's inevitable they're going to beat Arsenal in the final. Shout out to Arsenal for completely, not saying an upset, but definitely they pulled a bit of a surprise result over Lyon to deny a Lyon-Barca rematch. But for Chelsea, they're just looking at what if over the last 5-10 years, because they just, no one's touching them in England, and yet they haven't been able to translate that to European glory.
And Jade Riviere picked up an injury this weekend as Manchester United drew 2-2 with Manchester City, a result which proved good enough to claim the final UWCL spot from the WSL for Manchester United, but it looked like it was an ankle issue that had her leave this match early.
Yeah, and just you hope it's not too serious, because she's been really great form, frankly, for Manchester United. She really, found a regular rhythm, has been contributing more assists, getting up the field more, just being overall more dangerous. But we know with Riviere, she's struggled just to stay fit for club and country. So hopefully it's nothing too big, because I think she could have a real big role to play under Casey Stoney, just with how she can play on both sides of the ball. And this year at Manchester United, it's felt like we've really started to see the glimpses of the potential she showed it in college and when she burst onto the scene, but hasn't been maybe able to show as much over the last few years.
And we could have another Canadian star defender at Bayern Munich as well. Vanessa Gilles has been linked to a move to the club for 2025-26 as her loan with Lyon is set to expire. Could be interesting.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting sign from Bayern, who have quietly been making a lot of big signings. With their women's side, someone like Gilles would be another one, like one of the best defenders in the world. Had some excellent seasons at Lyon. Lyon, by their standards, the fact that they didn't even make a Champions League final this year, that they lost last year. Interesting that someone like Gilles could go, but if she could go and be part of a revitalized Bayern project, something to watch. So, and a different challenge, of course, in terms of the leagues, in terms of the style. The French league, of course, as we know, very top heavy. From what I've seen in Germany, there is a bit more, there's still a pretty big disparity between like the Wolfsburgs and Bayerns of the league and the rest, but there've been some interesting stories, further down the table. So it could be fun to have, and of course, the story of having two stars at Bayern, one on the men's national team, one on the women's national team. Pretty cool parallel.
And also, we can have some news from Liga. Moise Bombito, some concerning reports this week. He could miss the Gold Cup. Matthew Shinetti reported that he will wait until the end of the season to operate on a broken wrist that kept him out of action, reportedly. Timeline seems strange, but a good reminder that it's tough for guys like Bombito, who haven't really had a rest since before 2024, did the first half of 2024 with Colorado and MLS, did Copa America, then right into the Liga season. He hasn't really had an off season, and this could be an opportunity for him to fully recover.
Yeah, that's what I wonder, because ultimately when you hear a wrist, something where, like, he played this weekend with it, and he hadn't operated. Man of the match performance. It was great to see him back. He looked like himself, because I know he had a couple of quieter games even before the injury. But yeah, I think that's probably the bigger thing. It is an interesting point, though, because he is so important to Jesse Marsh. He's played every minute. He's the only guy to play every minute. Not even goalkeepers, not even guys like Alistair Johnson. It has been Moise Bombito, who before was someone we were just hoping to see in a Canadian shirt. Now he's the rock at the back. The reality is he is Jesse Marsh's system. He's the pace. He's the rock. He's the ball player that helps set up attacks. He does so much back there that it's going to be fascinating to see what the defense could look without him. So it's tough, because on one hand, you want to see him just continue to develop that chemistry, continue to be one of the important players. But I think the offseason is a big one, because he could have a big year coming up next year. Nice are pushing for Champions League. It's a World Cup year. If he has another busy summer, he risks an injury to start the year. All of a sudden, it could derail that World Cup year. So I do wonder if that's a big factor that's playing on top of it. And the wrist is just a perfect reason to use it as to rest and recover.
Domestic leagues as well, continuing on this weekend. Northern Super League, AFC Toronto picking up a win 2-1 against the Calgary Wild at their York Lions Stadium home opener. Montreal Roses picking up a win in their opener, 2-1 over the Ottawa Rapid. And Vancouver Rise also picking up a 1-0 win. An absolute belter of a goal from Jasmine Spencer against the Halifax Tides in what looked like a pretty perfect night at Swangard Stadium. But Alex, your thoughts on the NSL's third week slate, sort of?
Yeah, no, definitely lots to take away. Is that the big three all won, right? We granted Vancouver and Montreal already had wins under their belt, but AFC Toronto getting going, getting two great goals. I thought that was a bit encouraging. We talked the last week about the injuries, just the bit of the weird start that they've had. it was Orquanquo, right? If I'm not mistaking the pronunciation, scored two great goals. Looks like someone who could be a bit of a threat up front. We saw some Kaylee Hunter, which we wanted to see. So good on for Toronto. They'll look to build some momentum. Montreal, they just look like an absolute wagon. We talked last week about Abdu and Boychuk. What happens? Boychuk and Abdu both score in the win. Those two are just like, that just feels like a wealth of riches to have both of them starting. That Montreal attack looks incredible. But for Rise, it's a bit of a mixed bag, in fact, because on one hand, they keep a clean sheet. They get their second win. But again, another goal off a set piece. They're still looking for some open play magic. They'll be happy that they're defending well, that they're tough to play against, and that they're, those set plays are an advantage that Anya Heiner Muller spoke of. They have some great delivery, but this is going to be, if they're going to want to compete with Montreal at the end of the year. Montreal, what they're doing so well is they're just so dangerous in open play, and that's something that the Rise are going to be watching. But definitely interesting to see that. We're already starting to see a bit of that split between Montreal and then Vancouver, and then right now it's kind of been the rest.
And in the CPL, Atletico Ottawa sitting atop the league after 5 games with 4 wins and a draw, all led from some stellar play by David Rodriguez. They beat Pacific FC this weekend with some stellar goals and the standout Wiener Dog race, which was a slow news day on the Saturday desk on Sports Illustrated. And, the Wiener Dog race was quite good. So put a story up there, and it seems to be well received as well. But Alex, I know it's your dream to run your future Wiener Dog in this race. So what was your analysis of, I think it was Blazing Biscuits win in the halftime show?
Yeah, that race is just incredible. I love that Ottawa does that. And man, I think the strategy learns is just, it's all about the finish. These Wiener Dogs, you get a little distracted. They can, they're short legs, they get tired. You have to just get the stamina to keep going and then finish strong. So definitely, if I were to put together a training plan for this hypothetical where I want to absolutely be at that race and potentially have an entry, it's going to be all about the ending, the training. So I don't know. It's gonna be some creative solutions perhaps to work on that. But yeah, man, vibes are good in Ottawa. They got puppies running around on field. They got, they're winning. They're scoring 3 goals a game on average into the next round of the Canadian Championship. Definitely some good vibes in the nation's capital.
Vancouver FC picked up their first win of the season as well, a 3-1 win over Valor in Winnipeg, and things just seem to keep going badly for Valor, and they'll hope not to trip over the TSS Rovers in their first round Canadian Championship game either.
Yeah, no, they're still looking for that first win. This is a great chance to do so. The first Cup home game that they're playing since 2019. The last few years, they've constantly been drawn on the road. Sometimes like last year, that was by, necessity with the renovations. Other years, just by luck. So this being back at home will be a big one. And yeah, the Rovers will feel confident because they beat Valor on the grass at Swangard 2 years ago. One of the most memorable, if not the most memorable night in Canadian Championship history, at least in terms of cup sets. Although Saint Laurent last year was pretty darn special as well. The Rovers will hope for another upset, but Valor, if this is definitely feels like a huge game for their season. If they win this, you can build some momentum. You saw with Cavalry, who picked up their first win this weekend in the CPL action with a 2-1 win over York. Well, who knows if they don't get that without a 6-0 win over Edmonton Scottish, where they built some confidence, got some guys going. Sometimes that's the great thing about the Cup, and I think Valor will be looking at this Rovers game and thinking, man, just get a win here, and then I can perhaps get the wheels going on their CPL season.
And the HFX Wanderers tied 0-0 with Forge in one of the more forgettable CPL games of the weekend. But all things good in Atletico Ottawa, and we've certainly seen Montreal being solid in the NSL as well, as the domestic seasons are in full swing, and some great soccer on display, both at the pro level, and you can go down to the League One level as well. It's been a fun season there so far. But that's all we've got for episode 229 of the Northern Futbol Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube at the 90th Minute YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcasts as well. If you leave a review, we love that as well. But for Alex and Brendan, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next time.